Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Scary True Stories, Haunting Tales from the Japanese Underground, Part 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The first story begins with a group of young people gathering to have a few drinks. Feeling inexplicably excited with nowhere to vent their energy, a muscular man in the group suggested they go out for a test of courage. He happened to know of a nearby empty house where someone had died, so he took 2 friends along. Upon arriving, feeling the atmosphere wasn't terrifying enough since he's backed up with his ghost-proof muscles, the muscular man proposed they each tell a ghost story. His slender friend wasn't happy with this idea, insisting that they couldn't have stories without alcohol. He told the others to sit tight while he went to buy beer and fried chicken, then left. Now, only the muscular man and a girl remained in the house. Taking advantage of the situation, the man sat down right next to the girl. However, she was in no mood for romance, as the eerie atmosphere had her terrified. Just then, she heard a strange noise. The man didn't think much of it, assuming it was their friend returning to play a prank on them. However, when he went to the door and shouted a few times, he realized something was wrong because a girl's voice responded to him. The sound made their scalps tingle and sent chills down their spines all the way to their smelly butts. The man unknowingly dropped what he was holding while the girl's lips trembled with fear. She asked him what was knocking outside, but he shook his head, not knowing. He suggested she hide in the closet immediately. Just as they hid, a child entered the room and told them not to play hide-and-seek and to come out and play with her. Through the crack in the closet, the man saw a bizarre girl in a red kimono crawling on the floor. Seeing her, the 2 of them held their breath, daring not to make a sound. However, after a short while, the girl hiding in the closet couldn't hold it in any longer. Having eaten too many radishes that night, she let out a loud, continuous fart. This sound caused the ghost girl, who had been crawling toward the man, to head straight for the girl instead. The girl covered her mouth and nose again and turned away, daring not to look, though in reality she was covering her nose because of the smell. If it were out of fear, she would have covered her eyes. But it was useless. Moments later, the girl heard the sound of the closet door opening. When she turned around, she saw a sight she would never forget. The child said that she had finally found her. The 2 of them didn't know what happened after that. When their friend returned with the food, he found both of them passed out on the floor. Afterward, although the girl wasn't sure if that ghost child was the person who had died in the house, she indirectly learned that the empty apartment was considered a severely haunted location in the area. This is where the story ends. The second story begins with a taxi driver who had a long-distance fare and made good money. In a very happy mood, he prepared to head home. On the way, the radio suddenly started buzzing with static, which ruined his mood. Just as he was trying to tune it, he almost hit a woman. She was dressed all in black with long, flowing hair and a pale face, looking a bit malnourished. Overall, quite eerie. However, the driver didn't think much of it. She remained silent throughout the ride. Even when he tried to strike up a conversation, she wouldn't say a word, which made him feel quite bored. Eventually, the car stopped at an intersection. The driver confusedly asked the woman to confirm if she really wanted to go down that road. After seeing her nod, he turned in with some resignation. He knew that the road was not only difficult to drive on, but also didn't seem to have any houses at the end. However, since the customer requested it, he couldn't argue. But as he drove, the road became increasingly desolate, prompting him to ask again if she was sure she hadn't remembered the wrong way, and if people actually lived there. After he spoke, something strange happened. He realized the woman in the back seat had disappeared. Shocked, he looked back, and that distraction nearly caused the car to plunge off a cliff. At the critical moment, he slammed on the brakes and narrowly escaped disaster. Before he could recover from the shock, he heard a woman's voice say how nice it would be if he had just fallen to his death right there. The third story begins with a boy being sick in the hospital. That night, the boy had a stomachache from needing to urinate badly. Another child asked him what was wrong, and he explained that he dared not get up to pee because the mirror next to the toilet was too terrifying. Their voices attracted the head nurse who was on her rounds. She asked the boy if the rumors about the haunted mirror in the hospital were true. Unexpectedly, the head nurse went silent and, after a moment, told the 2 kids to stop speaking nonsense, stating that there couldn't possibly be a ghost in that mirror before leaving. After the nurse left, the older child muttered that the head nurse was even fiercer than his mother. The younger boy couldn't hold it anymore and slowly walked out of the ward to use the toilet. Nothing happened at first, but on his way back, curiosity got the better of him. He walked up to the mirror and took a look. He saw a white shadow flash past in the reflection. He immediately turned around but saw nothing. The moment he turned back to the mirror, he seemed mesmerized and reached his hand toward it. Instantly, a hand reached out from the mirror and grabbed his. He then saw a woman appear in the mirror. After just a moment, the woman let go, smiled eerily at the boy who had fallen to the floor, and slowly vanished. It was then that the boy knew the stories about the haunted mirror were true. He was so startled that he scurried back to his room. Fortunately, the boy was discharged the next day. Before leaving, he looked at the mirror again in the presence of the head nurse. Judging by her expression, he felt she definitely knew something about it, but he lacked the courage to ask. Seeing his mother walking away, he quickly ran to catch up. This is where the story ends. The fourth story begins with a man renting an apartment. After a busy day, he returned home to find the ashtray on his coffee table turned upside down, with all the cigarette butts dumped onto the table. Holding the ashtray, he wondered if he had done it accidentally, but he had no memory of it. In fact, this had happened several times since he moved in. Although strange, he didn't consider it a major issue and ignored it. However, the next day, he came home to find his house in shambles, as if it had been burglarized. He searched the room but found nothing missing. He was about to call the police when he saw the strange ashtray again. This time, he finally took the matter seriously. On the third day, he told a friend about it and invited him over. The two sat staring at the ashtray for a long time. After several beers and no strange occurrences, the friend got bored and prepared to leave. The man didn't want him to go and asked him to stay a bit longer while he went to get more alcohol. While the man was gone, the friend turned away to look for some magazines. The moment the man brought out the beer and snacks, he suddenly realized the ashtray on the table had been turned over again, with cigarette butts scattered everywhere. The friend was astonished and quickly explained that he hadn't done it. The man knew that, so he simply remarked that he was going to quit smoking. However, the moment the man sat down, the friend seemed to see something terrifying behind him. He froze in shock. The man noticed his friend's stunned reaction and instinctively asked what was wrong. The question snapped the terrified friend out of it. He immediately stood up without saying what he had seen, grabbed his clothes, and left the house instantly. His behavior only frightened the man more. He tried to stop his friend, asking him to stay longer, but the friend was too scared to care. He forcefully shook off the man and ran away. Standing at the door in confusion, the man was suddenly pushed over by an invisible force. When he got up and looked into the room, he too seemed to see the entity. A few days later, the man's life returned to normal. He told his friend he had moved. However, a handprint remained on his back for quite some time. He didn't know who the entity in the rental was, but judging by the force of the push, it clearly didn't welcome him, which explained all the petty tricks it had played before. This is where the story ends. The fifth story begins with Hannah, who was in junior high school. One day, she was playing with friends near a temple close to her home when she heard a child crying. Following the sound, she found a little boy in the graveyard beside the temple. She asked him what was wrong, and he cried that he couldn't find his mother. Hannah felt a surge of sympathy and decided to help him. She took the boy to the temple to ask the head monk for help. The bald monk then asked her where the child was, and Hannah realized the boy was no longer by her side. When Hannah found the boy and pulled him in front of the bald monk, the monk looked puzzled but invited Hannah to bring the boy inside the main hall. Hannah didn't understand why they needed to go inside just to find the boy's mother. Once inside, the monk sensed Hannah's confusion. As he sat before the Buddha statue, he told her not to rush and to listen to him chant a sutra first. Although reluctant, she obeyed. The monk began chanting. After some time, Hannah unconsciously put her hands together in prayer, fully immersed in the chanting. At that moment, she felt surrounded by a warm aura. After a while, the monk finished. When Hannah opened her eyes, she found the boy was gone. She asked the monk where he went. The monk smiled and replied that the boy had gone home to his mother. Seeing Hannah's confusion, the monk remarked that she was truly kind-hearted, which was why the child liked her. Hannah was baffled. The monk walked over and explained that he actually hadn't seen any little boy at the beginning. He then left. His words made Hannah realize the boy was a ghost. That explained why the monk had asked where the boy was and why he insisted on bringing her inside to chant, despite her confusion. Realizing this, the girl smiled and silently wished that the boy and his mother would never be separated again. This is where the story ends. It feels like that final blessing is rather scary. If the boy's mother is still alive, that seems like another kind of curse. The sixth story begins during a soccer training camp. It was very late at night, but on a whim, the protagonist and a friend went for a drive. On the way, they passed a vending machine and saw a girl with a nice figure standing next to it. The man immediately stopped the car beside her. His friend even fixed his hair before trying to strike up a sexy conversation. The girl didn't reply but seemed busy looking for something. The friend, confused but undeterred, asked her what she was looking for, offering to help. She still didn't reply. The protagonist couldn't stand it and also spoke up, suggesting they help her look. This time, she responded. The protagonist told his friend to grab a flashlight. Just then, he noticed the girl had stood up. She was tall with long legs. But the moment she turned around, the protagonist was so shocked by her terrifyingly beautiful yet horrific face that his stinky foot instinctively slammed on the gas, and they sped far away. His friend, confused, asked why he had suddenly accelerated. The protagonist, still in shock, stammered that there was something very wrong with that sexy woman. The friend was even more puzzled, asking what he meant. Just as the protagonist was about to explain what he saw, he suddenly realized the girl seemed to be chasing them. She was clinging to the window, questioning the two guys about why they weren't helping her find it as they had promised. The two men screamed at their full chicken lungs. The seventh story begins with a haunted house that even TV stations are afraid to film. It is said that at night, the curtains of this empty house are lifted halfway, as if someone is looking out from the inside. One night, a group of young people, having had a few beers, decided to investigate. The group of men and women brought full camera gear, determined to see the legendary invisible tenant. They arrived downstairs, took photos for posterity, and prepared to enter. Upon opening the door, one woman habitually shouted an apology for the intrusion, but naturally received no response. As they explored, they found the place messy and old, but otherwise fine. A renovation would make it livable. They chatted and took photos. After checking the first floor, they went to the second. There, they noticed the half-open window, but it just looked like someone hadn't closed the curtains properly. They didn't see any paranormal phenomena. After touring all the rooms in the house, the group felt bored and disappointed, but also relieved that they hadn't encountered anything terrifying. Before leaving, the loud woman shouted again, apologizing for the disturbance. They left the house. Outside, they began checking their recordings to see if the camera had captured anything invisible to the naked eye. The playback did not disappoint. When they first entered and the woman had shouted her apology, there was actually a response. Listening closely, they could clearly hear a male voice say, "Welcome." One of the men became obsessed and continued playing the video to see what else was recorded. They then saw that as they were preparing to leave and the woman shouted her apology again, the male voice that had welcomed them seemed annoyed and suddenly became incredibly violent, screaming that they were not allowed to leave. Hearing this, everyone was terrified. Staying meant they'd be attending their own funerals, so the four of them fled immediately. This is where the story ends. The eighth story begins with a woman and her best friend drinking a lot of alcohol. Drunk, they chose a nearby hotel to sleep. In the middle of the night, the woman was suddenly startled awake. Eyes wide, she stared fixedly at the ceiling, appearing to see something horrific. She started shouting for her friend to turn on the lights. Her friend, sleeping soundly and clearly reluctant, saw the woman acting strangely and obeyed. After the lights were on, the woman told her to look at the hotel ceiling. However, her friend saw nothing. Confused, the woman dragged her friend to check out and go home without explaining. Once home and calmed down, the woman explained what had happened. While sleeping, she had been woken by a strange sound. She initially thought it was coming from the radio next to her and tried to turn it off, only to find the radio wasn't on. If it wasn't the radio, what could it be? At first, she thought she was hallucinating, but as the sound grew louder, she realized it sounded like human groaning. In a daze, she distinctly heard a woman's voice crying out for her to help. Following the sound, she looked up and was horrified to see a head emerge from the hotel ceiling. Her friend didn't believe her, attributing it to a drunken hallucination. Exhausted from the ordeal, the friend went back to sleep and the night passed. The next day, on her way to work, the woman passed the hotel from the previous night and saw a crowd of police officers. She went to see what was happening and heard that a murder had occurred there. A woman had been killed. Later, she learned that the murder scene was in the room exactly above theirs. Recalling the cries for help, she realized it had been the victim's voice just before she died. She wondered if the woman would have been saved if she hadn't run, but instead called the police or notified the hotel to check the room, or if she herself had been harmed by the killer. But it was too late for what-ifs. Realizing this, she turned and left, and the story ends here. The ninth story begins with an abandoned house on the way home from school. It was said a fire had occurred there previously, claiming the life of a young woman. Strange events followed, turning it into a legendary haunted house. However, some bold children didn't believe the rumors. One day after school, a boy and his friend went to explore it. After a cautious look around, they found it dilapidated, but not as scary as they had imagined. They let down their guard and played inside until a woman in red appeared. Seeing her, they were terrified, realizing the legends were true, and ran away. After calming down, they recalled that when the woman appeared, they had smelled a burnt odor, making her identity obvious. They dared not speak of it again. That night, the boy had nightmares all night about the woman in red and once again smelled the burning scent. The next day, his friend acted strangely and started setting fire to a trash can at school. Fortunately, a teacher noticed in time, narrowly avoiding a disaster. Afterwards, the teacher had to call his parents. The friend, regaining his senses, tearfully told the boy that the woman in red had been beside him, instructing him to set the fire. He could only tell the boy, as his mother would never believe him and would surely give him a beating. Nothing happened for several days after that. Just as the boy thought it was over, he saw the woman in red at his grandmother's door. Scared, he ran home without staying. That night during dinner, they received a call from his grandmother saying her house was on fire. His parents rushed over. The boy felt certain it was related to the woman in red. Fortunately, the fire wasn't large. Later that night, as the boy prepared for bed, he smelled burning again. He followed the scent and found his own house on fire. The flames were too big to fight, so he immediately woke his parents to flee. By the time the fire department arrived, the house had been mercilessly consumed. His parents stood by, crying inconsolably. The fire had destroyed half a lifetime of their hard work. Behind the crowd, the boy saw the woman in red again. Angry, he wanted to confront her and ask why she had done this, but when he went to where she was standing, she had vanished. He looked at the crowd gathered to watch the fire. Only a few were sympathetic, while most were laughing and watching the spectacle as if it were a show. Seeing this, the boy's first thought was anger, wondering why watching someone else's house burn was so amusing. But then, he instantly understood why the woman in red did it. She had died in a fire, yet he and his friend had visited her ruined home with an attitude of amusement and curiosity. Their behavior had been just like the crowd now watching his house. They were all onlookers enjoying a tragedy. He realized how hateful they were, and he had been just like them. Having experienced the fire himself, he finally understood her feelings. He no longer hated her. Instead, he prayed she would move on, because he never wanted to see her again. This is where the story ends. The 10th story begins with a girl taking an unfamiliar route home one evening after school, which passed a railroad crossing. As she arrived, the alarm sounded and the barrier lowered for an approaching train. While waiting, she squatted to tie her shoelace. She inadvertently looked up at the passing train and saw a pair of pale legs. Before she could be shocked, the legs vanished as the train sped by. The next day, she told her best friend. The friend thought the girl must have been seeing things, but added that if she wasn't, the legends about that place must be true. The friend seemed excited, but the girl didn't understand what she was talking about. The girl was unaware of the rumors about that road. If she had known, she certainly wouldn't have walked there at night. The friend didn't elaborate, but asked the girl to take her there that night. The girl was surprised, but agreed. They waited a long time that night, but saw nothing strange. The friend began to suspect the girl was lying, said there was nothing there, and left. Following behind, the girl was also bewildered, wondering if she really had hallucinated. Just then, she heard footsteps coming from the tracks. Curious, she stood and looked, first seeing a pair of feet, then legs. She recognized those legs and was terrified. The next moment, when she saw the woman's upper body, she was so scared she collapsed on the tracks. This is where the story ends. The 11th story begins with a female student having so much fun at her club activities that she forgot about her cram school exam. Although she pedaled her bike furiously, barring a miracle, she would be late. She arrived at a fork in the road and hesitated. Usually, she wouldn't even consider taking this path because of the legends surrounding it, but if she was late today, she was doomed. She forced her bike onto the path, telling herself to just pedal hard and not look around. However, plans change. After riding a while, her bike broke down. Cursing her luck, she stopped to check only to find nothing wrong with it, which was eerie. Just then, she heard a strange noise. Turning around, she saw an empty swing moving on its own. Wanting to push her bike and leave quickly, she looked up and saw 4 people walking toward her, dressed strangely in straw raincoats. Seeing them, she stopped until they passed her one by one. Her intuition told her not to look at them, or she would be in danger. After they passed, she looked back, but they were gone. She didn't wonder where they went, but quickly got on her bike and pedaled hard to get away. Eventually, she made it out of that street, but was puzzled to find the main street completely empty, despite it not being very late. She glanced back and was horrified to see the group of strange people blocking the middle of the road. She slammed on the brakes and fell hard. The strange people surrounded her and reached out as if to do something to her. She fainted from fear. When she woke up, she saw her mother, who said she had been found lying on the street. Her mother then went to call a doctor. For the protagonist, apart from a broken arm, it was all good news. The eerie people were gone, and she didn't have to take the exam. Feeling relieved, she tried to convince herself it was all a dream, but the straw remaining in her hair told her it wasn't. This is where the story ends. When the protagonist exited that street, the strangeness she encountered outside indicated she had likely attracted something unclean. The group of people suddenly appeared to remove the entity from her. They were exorcists, and they blocked her path to cleanse her. Their purpose for being on that street was also for exorcism, and she just happened to run into them. The 12th story begins with a girl who loved horror stories and often read horror novels or watched scary movies from Daniel CC Movie Channel. One night, while reading past midnight, she suddenly felt a gaze on her back. She turned but saw nothing. Normally, she enjoyed that creepy feeling when reading horror, but this night felt different. In other words, before it had always felt fake, but tonight, her intuition told her something was genuinely in the room watching her. She wondered where it could be hiding. Deciding against finding out, she put the book down and went to sleep. The next day, she threw the book away since the content was just too terrifying and felt too real. Later that day, her classmate came over. Bored, the friend looked for a book to read and found the very book the girl had thrown out that morning. The friend asked if the book was good. The girl turned and was stunned. It was so good it was chilling. Seeing her friend about to open it, she immediately rushed to stop her, all the while wondering how the book she had thrown away had returned on its own. She told her classmate what had happened, but her friend didn't believe her and found it exciting. It seems they were cut from the same cloth. Later, the girl threw the book away again. But late that night, her classmate secretly retrieved it and started reading it, sitting in the same spot the girl had been in. The girl woke from her sleep and saw this. Instantly, she felt that gaze again. Lying in bed, she searched frantically and found the source, a female ghost under the desk at her friend's feet. Seeing this, she quickly got up and, ignoring her friend's confusion, pulled her away. The next day, she took the book to a temple and gave it to the high monks, letting it face off against the masters and the Buddha. And believe it or not, from that day on, she never felt that voyeuristic sensation again. This is where the story ends. The 13th story begins with a single mother raising 2 children alone. One day, while at work, she learned that her daughter had fallen from an upper floor. Although she was rushed to the hospital immediately, a head injury left her in a coma. The doctor warned that the next few days were critical. If she didn't wake up, the outcome was clear. The woman's sister, upon hearing the news, immediately came to the hospital and took her son home. Thanks to her sister's help, the woman could devote all her attention to her daughter. Seeing her daughter lying in the hospital bed, the woman felt immense guilt, but there was nothing she could do now but pray with all her might that her daughter would pull through. It was very late at night, but the woman couldn't sleep. Just then, she heard the sound of high heels. At first, she thought it was a nurse, but when she looked out, the hallway was empty. She suddenly felt very unsettled. The next day, she asked a nurse if they did rounds around 2 a.m. The nurse said that unless there was an emergency, they wouldn't patrol at that time. So who had made that sound last night? During the day, her daughter's condition worsened. The doctor said that night would be crucial and told her to prepare herself mentally. Hearing this news, the woman nearly collapsed. She called her sister and cried for a long time, but hearing her son's voice on the other end, she told herself she had to be strong. She was a mother of 2. That night, at the same time, the woman heard the sound of high heels again. What was different this time was that she found herself completely paralyzed, unable to move. At the same time, she heard a strange noise from the door, as if something was trying to get in. But just a moment later, she saw a person in white walk right through the door. Seeing this, the woman was petrified. She watched as the person approached the bed, stood beside her daughter, and placed a hand on her daughter's head, as if to do something. The woman desperately wanted to intervene, but being completely paralyzed, she was once again helpless. She watched as the hand continuously stroked her daughter's head, and she screamed internally, begging it not to take her daughter away. The woman closed her eyes in despair, afraid to see the person pull her daughter's soul out. A long time later, the woman suddenly woke up. She could move again. Her first instinct was to check on her daughter. After confirming that her daughter was unharmed, she felt relieved. But moments later, a miracle happened. Her daughter, who had been given a critical notice just the day before, woke up. She woke up for no apparent reason, and her recovery afterwards was remarkably smooth. Despite such a severe injury, she was discharged from the hospital after just a few days. Time flew by and 14 years passed in a flash. The girl had grown up. Perhaps influenced by the incident, she chose to become a nurse. The first day she was officially employed, she brought her uniform home for the first time. The moment her mother saw it, she was stunned. The uniform her daughter brought home was identical to the one worn by the person she had seen that night 14 years ago. Thinking back, the nurses at the hospital where her daughter had stayed did not wear blue uniforms. In that instant, a wild thought occurred to the woman. All along, there had been someone by her side, watching over her child, just as she had been. This is where the story ends. The 14th story begins with a nurse examining a girl who told her that last night an old grandfather had suddenly come into her room. The girl had been sleeping and was woken up by him. The old man apologized profusely and politely asked the girl if she had seen his cane. The girl didn't think much of it and looked around the room. Finding nothing, she heard the old man say with great regret that his cane was lost and that he would have a lot of trouble without it. He told the girl that if she found his missing cane, she should please bring it to the last room at the end of the hallway. After saying this, he left. Later, the nurse told her colleague about this. The colleague said it was impossible. The old man with the cane in the last room had passed away yesterday. But the nurse didn't think the girl was lying, as she had long heard that some hospitals were haunted, but she never expected it to be the one she worked in. Hearing this, her colleague stopped her from saying more, as she had to do her rounds soon. She ended up patrolling with a flashlight, trembling in fear. Unconsciously, she reached the door of the morgue. As she stood there, she heard a strange noise from inside. The next moment, terrified, she ran back to the nurse's station. She thought it was the deceased old man making the noise, but this time it was the nurse's turn not to believe. She said her colleague had just been scared by her story and was now scaring herself during rounds. Not believing it, the nurse went to the morgue herself. She went in, turned on the lights, and saw the old man lying peacefully. She muttered to herself that there was nothing there, then turned off the light to leave. But as she turned, she also heard a strange noise. Looking back, she was horrified to see the old man sitting up. In an instant, the nurse believed everything, and just like her colleague, fled back to the nurse's station. Interestingly, from that day on, the nurse and her colleague never mentioned the incident again by tacit agreement. Perhaps they felt there was no point in talking about it since they could do nothing except quit their jobs. The 15th story begins with a girl and her boyfriend going for a drive and, on a whim, visiting a supposedly haunted place. It was said a small ghost had left behind the two characters for sister. However, when they arrived, they didn't see the words, but they did find a warning sign with a large exclamation mark. The boyfriend explained that this wasn't an ordinary warning sign. This type usually appeared only in cemeteries or places where supernatural events had occurred. Seeing it made him excited, as it suggested there might really be a ghost there. They then came to an intersection. The boyfriend said that a child had once seen those two words, lost control, and rushed into the road. Just then, a car was speeding by, and a tragic accident occurred. Hearing this, the girl looked at the roadside and saw fresh flowers, clearly left by the victim's family. Her mood for ghost hunting vanished. She squatted by the flowers, put her hands together, and began to pray. The next moment, a gust of wind blew the flowers over, revealing bloodstains at the base of the post. Seeing this, her mood instantly soured. She felt their idea of visiting a paranormal site was deeply inappropriate and told her boyfriend she wanted to leave. However, not long after they got back in the car and started driving, the girl saw something incredible in the rearview mirror. She quickly told her boyfriend to stop the car and got out to look. Her boyfriend also saw it, the two large characters for sister. At that moment, a strange feeling came over the girl, as if she was being looked down upon by those two words. This is where the story ends. The 16th story begins with a girl's distant aunt who had taken her own life. They were very distant relatives and rarely kept in touch, so the girl initially felt she didn't even need to attend the funeral. But for some reason, she ended up going. It was said that her aunt's suicide was related to her uncle. A few months prior, her uncle had a stroke and became paralyzed. The aunt had cared for him for several months and, unable to bear it any longer, gave up hope. In her diary, the girl found many entries expressing exhaustion. That night, the girl stayed over at their house. In the middle of the night, she woke up to find the closet door ajar. Her OCD kicked in, and she felt she had to close it before going back to sleep. But a short while later, the closet door opened again. Shocked, she hadn't even recovered when a hand reached out from inside and grabbed her, seeming to pull her into the closet. She struggled with all her might and managed to break free, but in a blur, the hand transformed into a cloth rope wrapped around her arm. She realized this was likely what her aunt had used to end her life. Terrified, she continued to struggle desperately. In a moment, she was dragged to the closet door. Looking inside, she saw her aunt. In desperation, the girl shouted that she wouldn't go with her and begged her to let go. She argued that although they were related, they weren't that close, so her aunt had no right to force her to go. After she said this, her aunt indeed let her go. The hand retracted, and the closet door closed on its own. After the terror subsided, the girl wondered if her aunt regretted her decision or was just lonely. But none of that mattered to her anymore. Now that she was safe, she just wanted to leave that place as quickly as possible. This is where the story ends. The 17th story begins with a salesman who sold various antiques. One day, he met a strange old man who immediately fell in love with a very large raccoon dog stone statue he was selling. The old man was determined to buy it, no matter what. The salesman was, of course, thrilled. After requesting home delivery, the old man vanished. His colleagues were envious of his big sale and muttered that the old man was probably a scammer or had dementia and couldn't pay. The salesman said nothing. Just then, the old man reappeared. He told the salesman that he used to have an identical raccoon dog, but it was very small and kept in his yard. Although it was a decoration, his family treated it as an important member of the family. But one day, it was suddenly stolen. The old man and his wife were heartbroken for a while. From then on, he had wanted to find an identical one but hadn't had any luck for years until he found this big one today. The old man thought that if this one was placed in the yard, no one would be able to steal it silently. Then the old man said something that baffled the salesman. He said that although he couldn't fulfill his promise to go find a new one with her, he hoped that when she saw it, she would be very happy. With that, he gave the salesman a piece of paper with a simple map drawn on it for home delivery. However, the salesman was busy for the next 2 days and couldn't make the delivery. They agreed that he would bring the raccoon dog over the day after tomorrow. Hearing this, the old man seemed to want to say something, but ultimately just said he trusted the salesman was a man of his word and would surely deliver it. He then left, hobbling away on his cane. 2 days later, the salesman drove to deliver the statue. As he approached the old man's house, he saw white signs guiding the way, making it easy to find even without the map. But when they arrived, they saw white lanterns hanging at the entrance. It seems like the old man had passed away. His assistant asked what they should do. The salesman didn't hesitate to reply that they would, of course, continue with the delivery. He had already taken the deposit and couldn't go back on his word. Besides, he had promised the old man he would deliver it. With that, they got out of the car and found the man of the house, who was the old man's son. At first, the son thought it was some kind of prank. However, when he saw the map his father had drawn for the salesman, he realized the situation wasn't so simple. He asked the salesman to describe the person who bought the raccoon dog statue. The salesman described the old man's height, the color of his clothes, his cane, and his glasses. He also recounted the story the old man had told him about the stolen raccoon dog. The man listened and realized the description perfectly matched his father. He told his wife to go get his mother. When the old woman arrived and saw the handwriting on the map, she confirmed it was her husband's. Looking at the large raccoon dog, she said sadly that when the small raccoon dog was stolen, she often told her husband they would go buy a new one together when they had time. Now, the new raccoon dog had arrived, but he was gone. Listening to this, the salesman suddenly felt it was fate that the old man had bought the raccoon dog from him in his final days. He asked if he could offer incense at the old man's altar. The family agreed, feeling that if the old man's spirit was aware, he would be very grateful to the salesman. Afterwards, the salesman went to the family altar and, looking at the old man's memorial photo, confirmed it was the same person he had met. He felt a pang of guilt, thinking that if he had delivered the statue immediately, the old man might have seen it with his family before he passed. But then the old man's son suddenly said that his father had been bedridden for a month before he passed away and hadn't left the house. He had died 2 days ago in the morning, the very morning the salesman said he had met him to buy the raccoon dog. The salesman was shocked. The person he had seen that day was the old man's spirit. Thinking back, it made sense why the old man had said what he did. Fortunately, he had not misjudged the salesman, who was indeed a man of his word. Then again, in a horror story, if you don't keep your promise, the next encounter might not be with such a kind old man. At this thought, the salesman bowed respectfully once more. The 18th story begins with a girl who was a sophomore in high school. At that time, her family was not well off, so to earn some extra money, she took a job delivering newspapers. The job was neither exhausting nor easy. Her studies were already demanding, and she had to wake up very early every morning to deliver papers. The fatigue was manageable, but there was one apartment building that terrified her. She couldn't explain why, but every time she went there, she felt a sense of dread. For the sake of her job, she had to force herself to go in. Fortunately, she had an amulet her grandmother had given her before she passed away. Whenever she felt scared, she would instinctively take it out and pray for protection. It had become her sole source of strength. One day, the girl bravely entered the apartment building as usual to deliver papers. As she was climbing the stairs, she felt as if someone had walked past her, but when she looked back, there was nothing. At first, she didn't pay it much mind and continued her work. However, the lights on the upper floor suddenly began to flicker eerily. As she went further up, the feeling of someone standing at the turn of the staircase persisted. What was different this time was that she felt someone was now behind her, but they vanished when she turned around. Overcome with fear, she instinctively clutched the amulet in her hand and rushed up the stairs to deliver the papers as quickly as possible. Luckily, this was the last floor. All she had to do was leave, but the thought of having to go down the stairs again made her scalp tingle. All she could do was grip the amulet tightly and pray that the terrifying thing wouldn't appear again. With that thought, she took a deep breath and ran down the stairs as fast as she could. Perhaps it was the amulet or her grandmother's protection, but she soon made it to the ground floor. Finally safe, she stood at the entrance and let out a heavy sigh of relief. But the next moment, that chilling sensation returned. She instinctively turned around and saw a terrifying woman. Seeing her, the girl screamed at the ghost's appearance. A long time later, the girl realized that the amulet her grandmother had given her had broken at some point. She wondered if its sudden break had saved her from a terrible fate. This is where the story ends. The 19th story begins with a full-time mother whose daily work consists of taking care of her husband, her children, and the never-ending housework. Her children are now high school students in their rebellious phase. Although they don't always listen, they are still communicable. However, recently she found that she couldn't understand the conversations between her two children. They talked about one person who couldn't see and another who could. The sister blamed the brother for always bringing something strange home, which scared her. The brother, however, was indifferent because he couldn't see it, though he sometimes felt something pressing down on him in his sleep. The mother listened, completely bewildered. She had often heard that a generation gap forms between parents and children as they grow up, but this was beyond a gap. It felt more like a trench. To bridge this trench and care for her children's well-being, the woman decided to have a heart-to-heart with her daughter. She wanted to ask if there was a secret between her and her brother and what they meant by the one who can't see and the one who can. The girl just gave an awkward laugh and didn't answer, only saying that it was better that her mother couldn't see. When her son came home from school, the mother wanted to talk to him too, but he dodged the conversation, using the excuse that he was tired. Later, the girl went upstairs alone, walking very cautiously. As she passed her brother's room, she peeked inside, but didn't dare to look for long. She remarked that it was really better for their mom not to be able to see. As she was about to go to her room, her brother called out to her. She was prepared to give a cursory reply, but her brother actually came out of his room. And that's when she saw it, the unclean thing clinging to her brother's back. This was what she could see, what her brother couldn't, and the very trench her mother was trying to fill. This is where the story ends. The 20th story begins with a man being very busy lately, working late every night. One evening, as he entered his apartment complex, he heard a child crying. Following the sound, he saw a small figure from behind. He instinctively checked the time. It's 1:15 a.m. What was a child doing here, crying at this hour? Without much thought, he called out to the child a few times, but got no answer. He reached for a nearby gate, and to his surprise, it opened. He walked straight into the yard, approached the child, and knelt down to ask what was wrong and if he couldn't find his parents. The child still didn't answer, but to his shock, stood up. When he saw the child's face, a million curses ran through his mind. He got up and ran for his life. Fortunately, his home was nearby, and he reached his front door in no time. Unfortunately, the child seemed to be even faster. It seemed to have followed him right home. At first, the man didn't realize it. Once inside, he kept telling himself it was fine, that it was just a mischievous child who didn't sleep at night. But his wife was highly intuitive. When she heard he was back, she got up to see if he needed anything. The moment she entered the living room, a strange chill ran through her, giving her goosebumps all over. Perhaps not knowing how to tell him, she just asked if he needed a bath drawn and then quickly left. To be honest, seeing his wife run away left the man a bit stunned, with no idea what had just happened. Later, while showering, he saw a figure walk past the bathroom door. He assumed it was his wife bringing him his pajamas, but as the figure drew closer, he was shocked to see it was the child. The man was terrified and told his wife everything. She asked him why this was happening, and he recounted the entire story of meeting the child. Upon hearing this, his wife told him that she had seen many police officers and an ambulance at the house where he found the child earlier that day. It was said the family had committed suicide, so the child he saw was a ghost. That night, the couple couldn't sleep. The next day, the man prepared to go to work. His wife was worried for his safety and wanted him to take a day off, but he had no good excuse. He couldn't very well say it was because he had seen a ghost. In fact, he was more worried about his wife being home alone. But she reassured him that she would be fine and would ask a knowledgeable friend for advice. However, after a phone call during the day, the woman was also at a loss. Her friend had no solution. After hanging up, strange noises started in the house. The woman thought her husband had come home, but after calling out and searching, she found no one. Then she saw it was a child. When the man got home from work, his wife's attitude was completely different from the morning. In a sarcastic tone, she accused him of having an easy time at work while she was at home, scared out of her wits by the child. She said it was all his fault for provoking the child in the first place. He was about to argue with his wife, but when he heard how serious the situation was, that it could threaten his life, he was also scared. Then he heard the child's mischievous sounds again. This scared the couple so much that their relationship instantly improved. They held each other tightly, wishing they could hide inside each other's bodies. They stayed that way all night. The next day, the man took the day off. He couldn't leave his wife alone at home. His wife seemed to have grown stronger and was even preparing to make him breakfast to replenish his energy from the previous night's ordeal. That is, until the child appeared at the dining table again. The woman couldn't take it anymore. She once again hid in her husband's arms. The couple became very depressed, wondering how long this would last and how they could go on living. Just as they were contemplating how to coexist peacefully with the child left on its own. On the third day, when the man woke up, he found his wife in an incredibly good mood. Because of her intuition, she knew the boy was gone. Hearing this, the man was overjoyed. But then he saw that his wife was crying. The woman said that the moment she could no longer feel the child's presence, she began to feel inexplicably sad and wanted to cry for no reason. A few days later, their lives returned to normal. Then, the man heard a piece of news. When the child's parents had died, the child had not. He had been clinging to life. The moment he disappeared from their home was the exact moment he passed away. That must be why his intuitive wife had felt so sad and cried. This is where the story ends. The 21st story begins with a girl's boyfriend telling her that a pedestrian crossing near his house was a bit strange. It looked like a perfectly ordinary crossing. But one night, as he was riding his bike through it, he suddenly felt as if something was grabbing at him, forcing him to stop and shout. When he turned around, there was nothing there. Though it was eerie, he didn't think much of it at the time. When he told his girlfriend, she just laughed at him. She even mindlessly asked if he might have been scraped by a tree branch, apparently forgetting that trees aren't allowed on pedestrian crossings. The boyfriend continued, saying that the first time he didn't pay much attention, but the second time he passed through there, he felt as if his foot was grabbed, pulling him to the ground. A car was heading right for him, and if he hadn't reacted quickly, the girl would probably be looking for a new boyfriend by now. After all this, the boyfriend suspected the road was cursed. Seeing that she still didn't believe him, he took her there. But perhaps because it was daytime, the road seemed perfectly normal, with few cars and people, except for a few bouquets of memorial flowers that had suddenly appeared on the other side of the road. A few days later, the girl was on her way to her boyfriend's place and had to cross this pedestrian crossing alone. Strangely, as she was waiting for the light to change, her mind started to feel inexplicably foggy. The moment she started to cross the street, just like her boyfriend, she felt something grab her foot and pull her down. She tried desperately to get up, but her body felt restrained and wouldn't move. But unlike her boyfriend, when she turned around, she saw a hand holding her foot. Before she could scream, another car was heading straight for her. Her reaction wasn't as fast as her boyfriend's, but luckily the driver was experienced. The girl's life was spared, but she learned her lesson. From then on, she never took that road again. As for what that thing on the road was, and whether it ever found another target, she never knew. This is where the story ends. The memorial flowers suggest that an accident had happened there before, so the incidents on this road are likely the legendary case of a ghost looking for a replacement. The 22nd story begins on Valentine's night when the protagonist and her best friend, both single, met up for drinks. Perhaps because they hadn't seen each other in a long time, they didn't want to part ways after drinking. They walked the streets and sat in a park, chatting about their school days, old friends, and future partners. But suddenly, the protagonist noticed that there were 3 shadows on the ground. Terrified, she grabbed her friend beside her and told her to look down. They both instinctively turned around, but there was nothing there but a street lamp. They looked at each other, and both could see the fear in the other's eyes. When they looked at the shadows again, the third one was gone. Frightened, they quickly left. It was now 1:30 a.m. They ran along the park path for a long time. Just when they thought they were safe, they saw a woman in white. This woman was rather eerie, dressed in white with black hair, and she seemed to teleport as she walked. The protagonist was so scared she collapsed on the ground. Her friend went to help her up. Then the protagonist saw something even more terrifying. She was too scared to even make a sound, just staring fixedly at her friend's shoulder because at some point a pale hand had appeared there. And then there was nothing more. The next day, the protagonist received a call from another friend who told her that a friend of theirs, Mina, had passed away the previous night. Hearing this news suddenly, the protagonist was shocked and saddened because during their school days, the 3 of them, Mina, her friend, and herself, had been the best of friends. Furthermore, it was said that Mina had passed away around 1:30 a.m., the exact time they had their paranormal encounter. Thinking back now, it seemed like the person they met last night had been Mina. She remembered that when they took photos in high school, Mina always loved to stand in the middle, and she liked to rest her hand on her friend's shoulder. So, that person must have been Mina. This is where the story ends. The 23rd story begins with a girl who had been a nurse for over a year. Her work was fine during the day, but she really disliked the task of doing her routine night rounds. This was because she had a psychic constitution and had been able to see things others couldn't since she was a child. Now, working in a hospital, well, you know how it is. She just hadn't gotten used to seeing ghosts so frequently. But since she had chosen this job and loved it, she had to love everything about it, including the night rounds. That night, as expected, she saw ghosts again. Normally, at this hour, the hospital corridors should be empty, but just as she reached a corner, she heard the sound of a noisy crowd from around the bend. When she walked over, sure enough, there were many people. When she approached, they noticed her and all turned to look at her. Their expressions didn't seem very friendly. The girl couldn't understand why. Apart from being able to see them, she didn't think she had offended them in any way. As she was thinking this and feeling scared, a hand rested on her shoulder. She turned to see it was the head nurse. The head nurse said there was an emergency that needed her help, so she wouldn't have to do her rounds tonight. The girl was, of course, overjoyed to hear this and left quickly. Before leaving, she glanced back at where the crowd had been. Sure enough, they had all vanished. The next day, although the events of the previous night were over, nagging questions bothered the girl. She wondered why they had gathered together, why they were in the hospital, and what they could have been discussing. Just then, the head nurse came again and gave her a new task, to look after an old man and observe him closely. The girl knew this old man because when he was first admitted, his condition was very serious, and it was likely he wouldn't make it. But no one cared, and no one came to visit him, not a single person. Now, the old man had been saved, and his health was gradually improving. And so, his family members all came. But they weren't primarily there to see him. They were there to have him sign his will while he was still alive. A truly pragmatic group of people. As she thought this, the girl suddenly realized what those hateful figures she had seen last night were. They were the living spirits of the old man's family members, spirits formed from excessive desire, lingering in that spot. And what they were discussing was undoubtedly the division of the old man's property. The thought was quite terrifying. Those people, though still alive, felt even scarier than the dead. This is where the story ends. The 24th story begins in the winter of the 5th year after their mother passed away. The passage of time is a frightening thing. It had diluted their dependence on their mother, and they had grown accustomed to their new life. Now, the family consisted only of the father, the older sister, and the younger sister, relying on each other, offering incense to their mother before every meal was a must. As they were about to eat, the younger sister mentioned that she had been having the same strange and unsettling dream recently. The older sister, however, wasn't concerned, thinking her sister was just watching too many horror movie recaps late at night. But that night, when the older sister came home, she first saw a strange man in their house. However, he vanished in the blink of an eye, making her think she was seeing things. When she went to her room and turned on the light, she saw her younger sister standing eerily in a corner, head down, not saying a word. The older sister asked her why she was standing there, and the younger sister replied that she was hungry. The older sister said she would make dinner right away, but then her sister started saying things were so dirty and that the grave hadn't been tended to and was in ruins. The older sister asked whose grave she was talking about, and the younger sister said it was the one that appeared in her dreams. The older sister didn't believe her and went to prepare food, but she was drawn back by her sister, who had started throwing things around the room. She didn't understand why her sister was acting this way and tried to stop her, but her sister started screaming like she was possessed. Fortunately, their father came home at that moment. Otherwise, the older sister wouldn't have been able to control her frenzied sister on her own. They immediately called an ambulance and took her to the hospital. But the doctor's examination results were shocking. Everything was normal. If everything was normal, why was she acting so insane? The man and his older daughter were very confused. The doctor suggested keeping her for observation and then left the room. After the doctor left, the younger sister had another episode. The father tried to press the call button, but his sister stopped him. The next moment, a strange smile spread across her face. Even more shocking, a voice that was not hers came from her mouth. It said something along the lines of them having forgotten him, that his grave was dirty and messy, causing him great discomfort and preventing him from reincarnating. It declared that at 6 a.m. the next morning, it would take the girl with it. The father, shocked, asked who it was. The voice replied that it was his ancestor. Then the sister became violent again. The medical staff rushed in and asked the father and sister to leave the room. In the hallway, the shaken older sister asked her father what that was and if it would really take her sister away. But the father told her it was just her sister's nonsense. Clearly, he didn't believe it. But what happened next left him no choice but to believe. The doctors who went in never came out. The younger sister's episodes of madness and laughter continued from the time of admission until 5 a.m. With 6 a.m. fast approaching, the older sister was frantic. The father, looking exhausted and tormented, was no better, but they didn't know what to do. The older sister kept muttering, wondering if her sister would really leave them and what they would do if she did. Then, as if possessed, the older sister reached into her pocket. She looked down and saw it was a handkerchief her mother had left behind. The next moment, a wind inexplicably blew through the hallway. In a daze, they saw the door to her sister's room open and they saw their deceased mother walk in. When they came to their senses, the door was as it was, and the event felt like a hallucination. But to their surprise, the doctor announced that the sister's condition had finally stabilized. After the doctor left, another miraculous thing happened. A voice emanated from the younger sister's body, the voice of their mother. The voice said that she had always been by their side and that she would protect her younger daughter. Those few words brought the father and older sister to tears. A long time later, it was past 6 a.m. As the first rays of the morning sun touched their faces, the younger sister woke up. Her mother had saved her. In a daze, the younger sister saw her mother standing in the corner of the hospital room. She looked at her daughter with a gentle, loving smile before slowly fading away. The younger sister recovered quickly and was miraculously discharged the next day. The older sister later learned that the male ghost who had been tormenting her sister that night was a relative from her father's side of the family. For some reason, he had remained single and had no descendants, so he was gradually forgotten. Upon learning this, the father immediately took his daughters to find the grave. They cleaned it meticulously and offered sincere prayers, hoping that he would no longer bother the younger sister. Their family had likely gained another guardian, though they weren't exactly thrilled about it. But because of him, they now knew that their mother had never truly left them. She had always been watching over them. The 25th story begins with a girl in her 5th grade. It was a Friday, and since there was no school the next day, she invited a classmate over to her house to play. They played until 11:30 p.m., but neither of them was sleepy. So the girl suggested they tell a ghost story to liven things up. She began her story saying that a friend of her friend was in the school band. One night, after finishing practice and heading home, she realized halfway that she had left something at school. So she went back to the music room to get it. But as she reached the classroom door, she suddenly heard something from inside the empty room. Suddenly, the door to her room opened, interrupting the girl's story. Both of them instinctively looked towards the door and saw the girl's mother, who asked them why they were still awake so late. The girl quickly replied that they were about to sleep, closed the door, and ushered her mother out. The spooky atmosphere was broken, and the story couldn't continue. But the girl still teased her classmate for being a coward because she had noticed her friend was clearly scared. The classmate being teased immediately denied it, saying she wasn't scared, just sleepy. The girl wanted to go to the toilet, but her friend didn't and told her to hurry back. After the girl left, the classmate was alone in the room. A while later, after finishing in the bathroom, the girl heard footsteps. She thought it was her classmate and called out a few times with no response. Then she thought it was her mother and called out again, still with no response. This made goosebumps rise all over her skin. She quickly returned to the room, chattering to her friend about how going to the toilet right after telling a scary story was a bad idea because it was so terrifying. But her classmate didn't reply. In her hurry, the girl didn't notice her friend's strange behavior and just continued asking if ghosts were real. She said she didn't have that kind of sensitivity and couldn't see them, so she wasn't sure. But she had heard that when you tell ghost stories, ghosts come to listen. She wanted to know if that was true. Just as she asked this, the girl noticed the room's curtains were open. Before she could figure out what was going on, she heard her classmate reply that it was true. Looking at her friend, she finally noticed how strange she was. Before she could react, her classmate suddenly tilted to the left, and the girl saw the little ghost outside the window. She let out a chicken scream and fainted like a weak chicken. The next morning, her classmate had no memory of the previous night's events. And from that day on, the girl's wish came true. She could see ghosts. This is where the story ends. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.